The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Cedar Ridge, Texas, as 17-year-old Rebecca Miller walked slowly toward the white wooden church. Her heart pounded with each step, and she pressed her hand gently against her rounded belly, hidden beneath the folds of her best dress. The year was 1847, and in this small frontier town everyone knew everyone else's business. Rebecca had been dreading this day for weeks. The church elder had summoned her family for what he called a matter of grave importance to the community. She knew exactly what that meant. Her condition was becoming impossible to hide, and the whispers had already started spreading like wildfire through the town. Her father, Thomas Miller, owned the general store and was respected by everyone in Cedar Ridge. He had built his reputation on honesty and hard work, coming to Texas from Virginia with nothing but determination and a strong back. Now, as they approached the church steps, his face was stone cold, and he hadn't spoken a word to Rebecca in 3 days. Her mother, Catherine, walked beside them with red, swollen eyes. She had been crying every night since they received the summons. Catherine loved her daughter dearly, but she also understood what this meant for their family's standing in the community. In a place where survival often depended on your neighbor's goodwill, shame could be deadly. The church was packed. Rebecca could feel dozens of eyes following her as she walked down the center aisle. The wooden pews creaked under the weight of curious townspeople who had come to witness what everyone already knew was coming. Children peeked around their parents' shoulders, sensing the tension but not understanding it. Pastor Williams stood at the front, his black coat making him look like a crow against the white walls. His wife, Martha Williams, held a piece of paper in her trembling hands. Martha had always been kind to Rebecca, teaching her to read better and sharing books from back east. But today her face showed only disappointment and sadness. "We are gathered here today," Pastor Williams began, his voice echoing in the silent church, "to address a matter that affects the moral foundation of our community." He gestured toward Rebecca, who stood with her parents in front of the congregation. Rebecca Miller, daughter of Thomas Miller, stands before us carrying a child conceived outside the sacred bonds of marriage. A murmur ran through the crowd. Even though everyone suspected, hearing it spoken aloud felt like a thunderclap. Rebecca's cheeks burned with shame, but she kept her chin up. Her mother had taught her that dignity was something no one could take away from you, even in your darkest hour. Martha Williams unfolded the paper and began reading in a shaky voice. The father of this child was Lieutenant Daniel Brooks of the United States Army, who was stationed at Fort Davis. When informed of the situation, Lieutenant Brooks denied responsibility and has since been transferred to California. He left no forwarding address and no provision for the child or its mother. Rebecca's heart broke all over again hearing those words. Daniel had been so different when he was courting her. He brought her wildflowers and told her stories of the places he'd been. He promised they would marry as soon as his service ended. He said he loved her and that she was the most beautiful girl he'd ever seen. When he asked her to prove her love, she believed every word he said. The morning she told him about the baby, everything changed. The warmth left his eyes, and suddenly he was talking about duty and career and how young they both were. Within a week, he had requested a transfer. Within 2 weeks, he was gone, leaving only a note saying he was sorry things had to end this way. "The church council has met," Pastor Williams continued, "and we have reached a decision. While we believe in forgiveness, we also believe in consequences. Rebecca Miller has brought shame upon her family and our community. She has violated the sacred teachings of our faith and set a dangerous example for our young people." Thomas Miller stepped forward, his voice steady but cold. "I want everyone here to know that I did not raise my daughter to behave this way. Her actions do not reflect the values Catherine and I tried to teach her. We are as shocked and disappointed as all of you." Rebecca felt like she had been slapped. Her own father was abandoning her in front of the entire town. She looked at her mother, hoping for some sign of support, but Catherine was staring at the floor, tears streaming down her face. "Therefore," Pastor Williams announced, "it is the decision of this church and this community that Rebecca Miller is no longer welcome in Cedar Ridge. She will leave today and not return. Her presence here would be a constant reminder of sin and would corrupt the moral atmosphere we work so hard to maintain." The words hit Rebecca like physical blows. Banished, cast out, alone. She was 17 years old, pregnant, and now homeless. Where would she go? How would she survive? What about the baby? "I have prepared a small bundle of supplies," Martha Williams said quietly, her voice full of regret. "It's not much, but it will help you get started somewhere else." She handed Rebecca a cloth bag that felt pitifully light. Thomas Miller reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather pouch. "There's $20 here," he said, not looking at his daughter. "It's more than you deserve, but I won't have it said that I sent you out with nothing." His voice was bitter, as if the money physically hurt him to give. Rebecca took the pouch with shaking hands. $20 might last a month if she was careful. After that, she would be completely on her own with a newborn baby. "Thomas," her mother whispered, finally finding her voice. "She's still our daughter. She's still just a child herself." "She stopped being a child the moment she made adult choices," Thomas replied harshly. "She made her bed, and now she must lie in it." The congregation began filing out of the church, many of them avoiding eye contact with Rebecca. Some looked sorry for her, but no one offered to help. In a community where survival depended on reputation, associating with someone who had been officially shamed was too dangerous. Old Mrs. Patterson, who had known Rebecca since she was born, paused beside her. "I'm sorry, dear," she whispered. "If things were different." She shook her head sadly and continued walking. Even Rebecca's friends from school walked past without speaking. Girls she had known for years suddenly found the floor very interesting when she looked their way. The boys she had grown up with acted like she was invisible. Within an hour, Rebecca stood alone on the main street of Cedar Ridge, holding everything she owned in one small bundle. The sun was getting higher, and she knew she needed to start walking before the heat became unbearable. But which direction should she go? She thought about the towns she knew. Fort Worth was 3 days' walk south, but it was expensive and she knew no one there. Austin was even farther and might as well be on the moon for all the good it would do her. Every settlement she could think of had the same problem. She was a young, unmarried, pregnant woman with no family and no skills that would earn her a living. As she started walking west, away from everything she had ever known, Rebecca felt the baby move inside her. Despite everything that had happened, she smiled slightly and placed her hand on her belly. "Don't worry, little one," she whispered. "I don't know how, but I'll take care of you. I promise." Behind her, the church bell began ringing for the regular Sunday service, as if nothing unusual had happened. Cedar Ridge would go on with its life, and within a few months, most people would rarely think about Thomas Miller's disgraced daughter. But Rebecca's real story was just beginning. The Texas sun was merciless as Rebecca walked away from Cedar Ridge. Each step took her further from everything familiar, but she had no choice except to keep moving forward. The small bundle Martha Williams had given her contained some dried bread, a water jug, and an extra dress. It wasn't much, but it was all she had between herself and the vast wilderness ahead. By evening of the first day, Rebecca's feet were covered in blisters. She had never walked so far in her life, and her condition made every mile feel like 10. She found a spot near some mesquite trees and tried to rest, but the ground was hard and the night sounds of the prairie kept her awake. Coyotes howled in the distance, and every rustle in the grass made her heart race. The second day was worse. The heat seemed to press down on her like a heavy blanket, and her water was running low. She had passed a few cattle ranches, but the cowboys who saw her just tipped their hats and rode on. A pregnant woman walking alone was clearly trouble, and no one wanted to get involved in whatever story had put her in this situation. By the third day, Rebecca was stumbling more than walking. The baby inside her seemed to sense something was wrong and had been moving restlessly all morning. Sharp pains kept shooting through her back and belly, and she was beginning to suspect that her time was coming sooner than expected. She had been following a creek bed, hoping it would lead to water, when the first real labor pain hit her like lightning. Rebecca doubled over, gasping, and knew with absolute certainty that this baby was coming whether she was ready or not. Fighting panic, she looked around desperately for some kind of shelter. About 50 yards away, she spotted a large cottonwood tree growing near the creek. Its branches hung low, creating a natural canopy that would provide some privacy and protection from the sun. Every step to reach that tree was agony. The pains were coming faster now, and Rebecca had to stop several times to breathe through them. When she finally reached the cottonwood, she collapsed on the soft grass beneath its shade and tried to remember everything her mother had told her about childbirth. Catherine Miller had been the unofficial midwife for Cedar Ridge, helping deliver dozens of babies over the years. She had always said that women's bodies knew what to do, that birth was as natural as breathing. But sitting alone under that tree with no one to help her, Rebecca felt anything but natural. The labor lasted through the afternoon and into the evening. Rebecca bit down on a piece of leather from her bundle to keep from screaming, knowing that sound could attract wild animals or hostile men. She used her spare dress as bedding and tried to stay calm, talking to the baby and to herself to keep her spirits up. "Come on, little one," she whispered between pains. "Your mama needs you to be strong. We're going to make it through this together." As the sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink, Rebecca's son finally entered the world. He was small but perfect, with strong lungs that announced his arrival to the empty prairie. Rebecca wrapped him in her petticoat, the softest thing she had, and held him close to her chest. "Hello, baby boy," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm your mama, and I love you more than anything in this world." She decided to name him James after her grandfather, who had always been kind to her. James Miller would have a fresh start in life, away from the shame and judgment that had driven them from their home. The next morning, Rebecca was weak but determined to find water and food. She had managed to deliver the baby safely, but she knew they were both still in serious danger. She needed help, but who would help a woman in her situation? That's when she heard the sound of horses approaching. Rebecca's heart raced as she clutched baby James to her chest. Through the cottonwood branches, she could see 4 men on horseback riding along the creek. But these weren't cowboys or soldiers. These were Comanche warriors, and they were heading straight for her hiding spot. Everything Rebecca had ever heard about the Comanche flashed through her mind. Stories of raids and kidnappings, of settlers who disappeared forever into the wilderness. She had grown up on tales of their fierceness in battle and their hatred of white settlers who were taking their land. But she was too weak to run, and even if she could, where would she go? She was trapped, holding her newborn son completely at their mercy. The lead rider dismounted first. He was tall and lean, probably in his late 20s, with long black hair and intelligent dark eyes. His clothes were a mixture of traditional Comanche dress and items taken from white settlements: beaded leather pants, a cotton shirt, and a silver bracelet that might once have belonged to a Mexican rancher. When he saw Rebecca under the tree, holding her baby, he stopped and spoke to his companions in their language. Rebecca couldn't understand the words, but she could hear surprise in their voices. This was clearly not what they had expected to find. The leader approached slowly, his hands empty and visible. Rebecca noticed he moved with the careful grace of a hunter, someone who was comfortable in the wilderness in a way she could never be. When he was about 10 feet away, he stopped and said something in Comanche. Rebecca shook her head. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. He tried a few words in Spanish, then switched to broken English. "You alone?" he asked, looking around for signs of other people. Rebecca nodded, unable to trust her voice. The warrior studied her for a long moment, taking in her torn dress, her obvious exhaustion, and the newborn in her arms. She could see him thinking, weighing his options. One of the other warriors called out something, clearly wanting to leave, but the leader held up his hand for silence, never taking his eyes off Rebecca. "Baby, new?" he asked, pointing at James. "Yesterday," Rebecca managed to say. "He was born yesterday," the warrior nodded thoughtfully. He went back to his horse and returned with a water skin and some dried meat. He placed them on the ground within Rebecca's reach, then stepped back. "You drink," he said in his careful English. "Baby needs strong, mother." Rebecca stared at him in amazement. She had expected death or kidnapping or worse. Instead, this Comanche warrior was offering her food and water when she desperately needed both. "Why?" she asked as she reached for the water skin. "Why are you helping me?" The warrior was quiet for a moment, as if searching for the right words. "Strong woman," he finally said, gesturing at her and the baby. "Brave, like warrior woman." He spoke briefly to his companions, who seemed to be arguing with him. Rebecca could tell they didn't approve of his decision to help her, but he appeared to be their leader, and eventually they fell silent. "I am called Soaring Eagle," he said, touching his chest. Then he pointed at her. "You have name?" "Rebecca," she replied. "And this is James." Soaring Eagle nodded. "Rebecca, James." He pronounced the names carefully, as if committing them to memory. "We go now, but—" He paused, looking troubled. "Winter comes soon. You need place, food, help." He was right, and they both knew it. Rebecca might survive another day or two on her own, But with a newborn baby and winter approaching, she would never make it to another settlement. She would die out here, and so would James. But what choice did she have? She couldn't ask these warriors to take her with them. She couldn't impose on the kindness of people who had every reason to see her as an enemy. Soaring Eagle seemed to understand her dilemma. He knelt down and placed some dried strips of meat next to the water, then added a small pouch that felt like it contained seeds or nuts. "I come back," he said quietly. "2 sons. I come back." Rebecca stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "I'm nobody. I can't repay you." Soaring Eagle looked at her for a long moment, then at baby James, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms. "All life. Precious," he said simply. "Mother and baby, most precious." He stood and walked back to his horse, swinging up into the saddle with easy grace. As the 4 warriors prepared to leave, Soaring Eagle looked back at Rebecca one more time. "2 sons," he repeated. "Stay here. Stay strong." Then they were gone, disappearing into the vast Texas landscape as quietly as they had appeared. Rebecca sat under the cottonwood tree, holding her son and wondering if she had just imagined the whole encounter. But the water and food were real, and for the first time since leaving Cedar Ridge, she had something that felt almost like hope. True to his word, Soaring Eagle returned exactly 2 days later. Rebecca had spent those days resting under the cottonwood tree, drinking the water he had left and rationing the dried meat carefully. Baby James was nursing well and seemed healthy, which gave her strength to keep going. She heard the horse approaching long before she saw him. This time, Soaring Eagle came alone, riding slowly so as not to startle her. He dismounted and approached with the same careful respect he had shown before, stopping several feet away and waiting for her to acknowledge him. "You came back," Rebecca said softly. Surprised by her own relief at seeing him again, Soaring Eagle nodded. "I say I come back." He gestured at her and the baby. "You better?" Rebecca managed a small smile. "Better. Thank you for the food and water. We wouldn't have made it without your help." He studied her face, noting that some color had returned to her cheeks and that she seemed more alert. "Baby strong?" "Yes, he's strong," Rebecca said, adjusting James in her arms so Soaring Eagle could see him better. "He's a fighter, just like his mama has to be." This visit lasted longer than the first one. Soaring Eagle sat cross-legged on the ground, keeping a respectful distance but close enough to talk. He had brought more supplies, not just food and water, but also a soft deer hide that could serve as a blanket for the baby. "Winter come," he said, looking at the sky. "Maybe 1 moon, maybe less. You cannot stay here." Rebecca knew he was right. The nights were already getting colder, and she had seen the signs her father had taught her. The way the animals were behaving, the changing color of the leaves, the angle of the sun. Winter on the Texas plains could kill even experienced frontiersmen. A woman with a newborn baby had no chance at all. "Where can I go?" she asked quietly. "No town will take me in like this. No family will help an unmarried mother and her child." Soaring Eagle was quiet for a long time, seeming to wrestle with something in his mind. Finally, he began to speak, slowly choosing his words in English. "My people, not like your people. We judge by strength, by courage, by what person do, not what other people say about them." He paused, looking at James. "You birth baby alone. You keep baby safe. You no cry, no give up. This is warrior spirit." Rebecca felt tears coming to her eyes, but they were different from the tears she had cried in Cedar Ridge. These weren't tears of shame or despair, but of something she hadn't felt in months, understanding. "Your people would accept me?" she asked, hardly daring to hope. "Some would, some no." Soaring Eagle was honest. "Change is hard. Your skin different. Your way's different, but—" He seemed to be searching for the right words. "Chief Tallbear is wise man. He judged by heart, not by skin." Over the next hour, they talked more than they ever had before. Soaring Eagle's English was better than he had first let on, and Rebecca found herself sharing things she had never told anyone. Her love of reading, her dreams of seeing the world beyond Texas, her fear that she would never be able to provide for James properly. In return, Soaring Eagle told her about his life with the Comanche. He described their seasonal migrations following the buffalo herds across the Great Plains. He talked about the freedom of life without fences or property lines, where a person's worth was measured by their contribution to the tribe rather than by how much land they owned. "But your people and mine are enemies," Rebecca said. voicing the obvious problem. There have been raids, battles. People on both sides have died. Soaring Eagle nodded gravely. Yes, much blood between our peoples. Much anger, much fear. But not all white people are same. Not all Comanche are same. You and me. We see person, not just skin color. He had brought something else with him, a book, taken from some long-ago raid on a settlement. The pages were worn and some were missing, but it was a collection of poems that Rebecca recognized from her school days. You read this? He asked, offering her the book. Rebecca took it carefully, running her fingers over the familiar words. Yes, I can read it. Can you? Little bit. I learned some letters from captured white boy long time ago, before he go back to his family. Soaring Eagle looked almost embarrassed. I want to learn more. Words on paper. They hold power. And so began an unlikely friendship. Over the following weeks, as autumn deepened toward winter, Soaring Eagle visited Rebecca every few days. Each time he brought supplies and stayed longer. Rebecca began teaching him to read better, using the poetry book and scratching letters in the dirt with sticks. In return, he taught her basic words in Comanche and showed her which plants were safe to eat, how to make a fire that wouldn't smoke too much, and how to read the weather signs. Sky like that, he said one day, pointing at the gray clouds gathering in the north, means snow maybe tomorrow, maybe day after. Feel how air change? How it gets still. Rebecca breathed deeply, trying to notice what he was talking about. Gradually she began to sense it, the way the pressure seemed different, the way even the birds were acting restless. I never learned to pay attention to things like that, she admitted. In town, we just looked at the almanac or listened to what the old-timers said about their bones aching. Out here, sky and wind and earth. They only teachers, Soaring Eagle said. They never lie, never guess wrong. As they spent more time together, Rebecca began to see the world through different eyes. Everything Soaring Eagle had been taught about white people suggested they were greedy, wasteful, and disrespectful of the natural world. But Rebecca was different. She listened carefully to his teachings about the land and the animals. She asked thoughtful questions and showed genuine respect for his knowledge. For his part, Soaring Eagle was fascinated by Rebecca's education. She could not only read and write, but she knew mathematics, history, and geography. She could tell him about places far beyond Texas, about ideas and inventions and ways of thinking that were completely new to him. Your people, they write down their thoughts so other people can learn them later? He asked one day as Rebecca read a poem aloud. Yes, Rebecca said. Books let us share knowledge across great distances and long periods of time. A person who died 100 years ago can still teach us things through their writing. Soaring Eagle was quiet for a moment, absorbing this concept. My people, we keep knowledge in stories. Elders tell to young ones remember and tell their children. But sometimes things get forgotten. Both ways have value, Rebecca said diplomatically. Your way keeps knowledge alive and personal. Our way preserves it exactly. But sometimes it becomes just words on a page instead of living wisdom. These conversations were changing both of them. Rebecca was learning that the savage warriors she had grown up fearing were actually people with complex thoughts, deep traditions, and sophisticated understanding of the world around them. Soaring Eagle was discovering that not all white settlers were the ignorant, destructive invaders his people believed them to be. But as winter drew closer, they both knew that intellectual exchanges wouldn't be enough to keep Rebecca and James alive. I must speak to Chief Tallbear, Soaring Eagle said one chilly morning when frost covered the grass around their cottonwood tree. You cannot survive winter alone. Baby cannot survive. Rebecca felt fear and hope battling in her chest. What if he says no? What if your people see me as just another white settler who brings trouble? Soaring Eagle was quiet for a long time, watching baby James sleep peacefully in his deer-hide blanket. The child had grown stronger over the past weeks, and his eyes were beginning to focus and follow movement. He seemed completely unaware that his survival depended on decisions being made by people he had never met. Then I must find another way to help you, Soaring Eagle said finally. I cannot let you die. Will not let you die. The intensity in his voice surprised Rebecca. Over their weeks of friendship, she had begun to sense that his feelings toward her were growing beyond simple compassion for someone in need. And if she was honest with herself, she had begun to care about him too, in ways that both confused and comforted her. Why? She asked softly. Why have you helped me when it would have been easier to just ride away that first day? Soaring Eagle met her eyes directly. Because you have warrior's heart in woman's body. Because you face fear without breaking. Because you love your child more than your own life. He paused, then added quietly, and because Great Spirit put you in my path for reason. I think maybe we both have much to learn from each other. As he prepared to leave that day, riding back to discuss Rebecca's fate with his chief, both of them understood that everything was about to change. The easy days of quiet conversations and gradual friendship were coming to an end. Soon Rebecca would either find a new home among the Comanche, or she would face the approaching winter with only her own courage to sustain her and her son. 3 days passed before Soaring Eagle returned, and they were the longest 3 days of Rebecca's life. She spent the time trying to prepare herself for whatever decision Chief Tall Bear had made, while also caring for James and watching the weather grow steadily colder. When she finally heard the familiar sound of approaching horses, her heart began racing. But this time, Soaring Eagle wasn't alone. 2 other warriors rode with him, and Rebecca could see the shapes of more riders in the distance. As they got closer, she realized this wasn't just a visit. This was an escort. Soaring Eagle dismounted and approached her with a serious expression that gave nothing away. Chief Tall Bear will see you, he said simply. He will decide if you stay or go. Rebecca felt her stomach clench with fear, but she nodded. What should I expect? What will he want to know? He will judge your heart, Soaring Eagle replied. Be honest. Show him the strength I have seen in you. Do not try to be what you think he wants. Just be Rebecca. One of the other warriors had brought an extra horse, a gentle mare with kind eyes. Soaring Eagle helped Rebecca mount, showing her how to hold James safely while riding. The baby seemed fascinated by the movement and the new sights around him, looking up at the sky with wide, curious eyes. The ride to the Comanche camp took most of the morning. As they traveled across the rolling prairie, Rebecca saw her first buffalo herd in the distance. Hundreds of massive, dark shapes moving like a living sea across the grassland. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying, a reminder of how vast and wild this land really was. My people follow the buffalo, Soaring Eagle explained as they rode. Buffalo give us everything: food, clothing, shelter, tools. When buffalo move, we move. It must be a hard life, Rebecca said, thinking of the comfortable house she had grown up in, with its solid walls and steady supply of store-bought goods. Different from your life, Soaring Eagle agreed, but not hard if you learn the ways. Buffalo teach us to move with seasons, to take only what we need, to waste nothing. Your people build walls to keep world out. My people learn to live with world as it is. As they approached the camp, Rebecca could see dozens of teepees arranged in a large circle, with horses grazing nearby and smoke rising from cooking fires. Children ran between the dwellings, playing games and chasing dogs. Women worked on various tasks, preparing food, making clothes, tending to babies. Men sat in small groups talking and working on weapons or tools. It looked surprisingly normal and peaceful. Nothing like the savage war camp Rebecca had imagined from the stories she'd grown up with. But as soon as the people saw Soaring Eagle's party approaching with a white woman, everything changed. Work stopped, conversations ended, and everyone gathered to stare at this unexpected sight. Rebecca could feel dozens of eyes on her, some curious, some suspicious, some openly hostile. Soaring Eagle led her directly to the largest teepee in the center of the camp. An older man emerged from it, and Rebecca knew immediately that this must be Chief Tall Bear. He was probably in his 50s, with gray streaking his long black hair and deep lines around his eyes that spoke of years of responsibility and difficult decisions. He studied Rebecca for a long moment without speaking, taking in her appearance, her obvious exhaustion, and the baby in her arms. When he finally spoke, it was in Comanche, directing his words to Soaring Eagle. The conversation that followed was clearly an argument. Rebecca couldn't understand the words, but she could hear the tension in different voices as other tribal members joined the discussion. Some seemed to be supporting Soaring Eagle's position, while others were clearly opposed. Finally, Chief Tall Bear held up his hand for silence. He walked slowly around Rebecca, not in a threatening way, but as if he were taking her measure from every angle. When he completed the circle, he spoke to her directly in surprisingly good English. Soaring Eagle tells me you are a woman of courage, he said. that you birth child alone in wilderness, that you survive when weaker person would die. But courage is easy to claim and hard to prove. Why should we welcome white woman into our tribe when your people kill our warriors and steal our land? Rebecca felt every person in the camp watching her, waiting for her answer. This was her one chance to make her case, and she knew that the wrong words could mean death for both her and James. "Because I'm not here as a white woman asking for charity," she said, keeping her voice steady despite her fear. "I'm here as a mother who will do anything to protect her child, just like any Comanche mother would do. My own people cast me out because they cared more about their rules than about human life. Soaring Eagle has shown me more kindness in these few weeks than my own community showed me in 17 years. Chief Tall Bear nodded thoughtfully. "And what would you bring to our people? What value would you add to our tribe?" Rebecca had thought about this question during her long wait. "I can read and write, and I can teach others. I know about medicine and healing. My mother was a midwife and taught me to care for the sick and injured. I can work hard and learn your ways, and—" She paused, looking down at James, then back at the chief. "My son will grow up understanding both worlds. Maybe that understanding will be valuable someday." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some people seemed intrigued by her answer, while others still looked skeptical. "Your child," Chief Tall Bear said, gesturing at James. "He has no father?" "His father was a soldier who abandoned us when he learned about the baby," Rebecca said honestly. "He chose his career over his responsibility to his family. So you would raise him alone? Without man to teach him warrior ways?" Rebecca felt her heart sink. She hadn't considered this problem. In Comanche culture, boys needed fathers or father figures to teach them hunting, fighting, and the skills they would need as men. Before she could answer, Soaring Eagle stepped forward and spoke rapidly in Comanche. Whatever he said caused another stir among the watchers. Chief Tall Bear's eyebrows rose, and he asked several sharp questions that Soaring Eagle answered with obvious conviction. Finally, Chief Tall Bear turned back to Rebecca. "Soaring Eagle has made an unusual proposal. He offers to take you as his wife according to our customs, which would make your son his son and give both of you full protection of the tribe." Rebecca felt the world spinning around her. Marriage to Soaring Eagle? She looked at the warrior who had saved her life, who had shown her kindness when no one else would. Over their weeks of friendship, she had come to respect and care for him. But marriage was something entirely different. "Why would you do that?" she asked Soaring Eagle directly. "Because it is right," he replied simply. "Because you need protection and your son needs father, because—" He paused, looking almost embarrassed. "Because I have come to care for you, and I believe you could learn to care for me." The honesty in his voice touched something deep in Rebecca's heart. This man was offering her not just survival, but a chance at a real life, a real family. It wouldn't be the life she had once imagined for herself, but it would be honest and honorable. "If I agree," she said carefully, "would I be expected to forget my own background completely? To pretend I was never Rebecca Miller from Cedar Ridge?" Chief Tall Bear smiled for the first time since she had arrived. "We do not ask people to forget who they were, only to become who they need to be. You will always be Rebecca, but you will also become Soaring Eagle's wife and member of our tribe. Both parts of you will have value." Rebecca looked around the circle of faces watching her. Some were friendly, some neutral, some still suspicious. But none of them looked at her with the disgust and condemnation she had seen in the eyes of her own people. "What about the baby?" she asked. "Would James be accepted as a true member of the tribe?" "Children are gifts from Great Spirit," Chief Tall Bear said firmly. "Your son will be raised as Comanche warrior, with all rights and responsibilities that brings. His white blood will not be held against him if his heart proves true to the tribe." Rebecca took a deep breath, feeling the weight of this moment. Everything in her life had led to this choice. Exile from her own people, survival in the wilderness, the unexpected kindness of a warrior who owed her nothing. "I accept," she said quietly. "I accept Soaring Eagle's proposal and the tribe's offer of membership." A cheer went up from some of the watching crowd, while others remained silent. Chief Tall Bear nodded approvingly. "Then we will hold the ceremony at sunset," he announced. "Soaring Eagle has chosen wisely, and the tribe will welcome its new members with appropriate celebration." As the crowd began to disperse, talking excitedly among themselves, Soaring Eagle approached Rebecca with a shy smile. "You will not regret this," he promised. "I will be good husband to you and good father to James. I will protect you both with my life. Looking into his honest, caring eyes, Rebecca believed him. For the first time since Daniel Brooks had abandoned her, she felt like she might actually have a future worth looking forward to. I hope I can be a good wife to you too, she replied. I have a lot to learn about your ways. We learn together, Soaring Eagle said gently. Marriage is journey, not destination. We take first steps tonight, but we have many years to find our way. As the sun moved toward the western horizon, Rebecca prepared for the most important ceremony of her life. She was about to become someone entirely new, not just the disgraced daughter of... The wedding ceremony took place as the sun painted the western sky in shades of orange and red. It was unlike anything Rebecca had ever experienced. No church, no formal vows, but something that felt deeper and more meaningful than the Christian weddings she had attended in Cedar Ridge. The women of the tribe had prepared Rebecca for the ceremony, braiding her hair with beads and feathers and providing her with a beautiful dress made of soft deerskin, decorated with intricate beadwork. They spoke little English, but their actions were kind, and Rebecca could sense their cautious acceptance of this unusual situation. Soaring Eagle wore his finest clothes, leather pants with detailed beadwork down the sides, a shirt decorated with porcupine quills, and a magnificent headdress that had belonged to his father. He looked every inch the proud warrior, but when he met Rebecca's eyes, she saw the same gentle man who had shared water with her under the cottonwood tree. Chief Tallbear conducted the ceremony, speaking in Comanche, while the entire tribe gathered in a circle around them. Rebecca couldn't understand all the words, but the meaning was clear when Soaring Eagle took her hands and spoke his own vows in both Comanche and English. I promise to protect you and your son as my own family, he said, his voice carrying clearly in the still evening air. I promise to share my strength when you are weak, my knowledge when you need to learn, and my heart for as long as we both live. When it was Rebecca's turn, she struggled with the unfamiliar language but managed to repeat the Comanche words Chief Tallbear whispered to her. Then she added her own promise in English. I vow to honor the customs of your people, to be a good wife and member of this tribe, and to raise our children to be proud of both their heritage and their new home. The ceremony concluded with the sharing of food from a single bowl, symbolizing their union as one family. As Rebecca and Soaring Eagle ate together, the tribe erupted in celebration. Drums began beating, people started dancing, and children ran laughing between the adults. Later that night, in the teepee that was now their home, Rebecca marveled at how quickly her life had changed. Just weeks ago, she had been a disgraced outcast with no future. Now she was a married woman with a new family and a chance to build a completely different kind of life. Are you frightened? Soaring Eagle asked gently as they settled down for their first night as husband and wife. A little, Rebecca admitted, holding baby James close. Everything is so new and different. What if I make mistakes? What if I can't learn your ways well enough? Everyone makes mistakes, Soaring Eagle replied, even me. Even Chief Tallbear. What matters is that you try and that you have good heart. Rest of will come in time. The winter that followed was both the hardest and most educational time of Rebecca's life. She had to learn dozens of new skills. How to prepare buffalo meat, how to make clothes from animal skins, how to keep a fire going efficiently in the teepee, how to pack and unpack their belongings when the tribe moved to follow the herds. The Comanche women were patient teachers. Though communication was often a challenge, Rebecca threw herself into learning their language, and gradually, she began to understand more of the conversations around her. She discovered that many of the women had their own stories of adaptation. Some had come from other tribes through marriage. Others had overcome personal tragedies and rebuilt their lives. Winter Flower, the chief's wife, became Rebecca's closest mentor. She was a woman of about 40 who had lost her own first child and understood the fierce protectiveness Rebecca felt toward James. White woman's love for child, same as Comanche woman's love. Winter Flower told Rebecca one cold morning as they worked together preparing hides. Mother's heart know no color. As the weeks passed, Rebecca began to find ways to contribute her own skills to the tribe's daily life. When several children came down with fever, she used knowledge her mother had taught her about herbal remedies, combining it with traditional Comanche healing methods. The children recovered quickly, and word spread that the new white woman had powerful medicine knowledge. You saved little Gray Wolf's life, Soaring Eagle told her proudly after she had successfully treated a young boy's infected wound. His grandmother says you have gift from Great Spirit. Rebecca also began teaching some of the children and adults to read and write. At first, this was met with suspicion. Many tribe members saw written words as white man's magic that could bring trouble. But Chief Tallbear was interested in the practical applications of literacy. If we can read the treaties they want us to sign, he said pragmatically, maybe we not get cheated so easily. Soon Rebecca had a small group of eager students, including several adults who wanted to understand the mysterious marks on paper that seemed to hold so much power in the white world. She used a charred stick to write letters in the dirt, and gradually her students began to grasp the concept that these marks could represent sounds and words. Soaring Eagle was her most dedicated student. In the evenings, after the day's work was done, he would sit beside her practicing letters and simple words. His progress was remarkable, and soon he was reading simple sentences from the poetry book that had brought them together. "Now I understand," he said one night, as he successfully read an entire poem aloud. "Words on paper like footprints in snow. They show where thoughts have been so others can follow same path." "Exactly," Rebecca said, delighted by his metaphor. "And just like footprints, they can lead you to new places you've never been before." But Rebecca was learning far more than she was teaching. Soaring Eagle and the other tribal members taught her to see the natural world with completely different eyes. She learned to read weather patterns, animal behavior, and plant cycles with an accuracy that would have seemed magical to her former neighbors in Cedar Ridge. "See how grass bend?" Soaring Eagle pointed out one morning as they traveled to a new camping spot. "Wind from northeast, but grass bend different way. Means storm coming from southwest in maybe 2 days." Rebecca studied the grass carefully, trying to understand what he was seeing. "How can you tell all that from the way the grass moves?" "Grass know things we forget," he replied. "Plants always honest. They cannot lie about weather, about seasons, about what Earth needs. We just have to remember how to listen." As spring approached, baby James was thriving in his new environment. The Comanche children adored him, and he was learning to respond to sounds in both English and Comanche. Rebecca often found herself amazed at how naturally he seemed to fit into this life that was so different from anything she had ever imagined. "He will be strong warrior," predicted Standing Bear, one of the tribe's most respected elders, but also wise man. Children who grow up between two worlds often see things others miss. The old man's words proved prophetic. As James grew from infant to toddler, he displayed an unusual ability to understand and communicate with people from different backgrounds. When occasional white traders visited the tribe, James seemed to instinctively know when to speak English and when to speak Comanche, acting as a tiny bridge between the two groups. But it was during a particularly harsh late winter storm that Rebecca truly proved her worth to the tribe. A group of children had been caught outside when the blizzard struck, and one little girl, barely 5 years old, was found nearly frozen. The tribal healers did their best, but the child's condition was grave. Rebecca combined everything she knew about treating hypothermia from her white upbringing with the Comanche knowledge of herbal remedies. She worked through the night, gradually warming the child and using a mixture of traditional and innovative techniques to restore circulation and body heat. When little Dancing Rabbit opened her eyes the next morning and asked for water, the entire tribe celebrated. The girl's parents wept with gratitude, and even the tribal members who had been most suspicious of Rebecca began to see her as a true member of their community. "You have earned your place among us," Chief Tallbear told Rebecca formally. "No longer are you white woman who married into tribe. Now you are simply one of us, valued for who you are and what you bring to our people." That night, as Rebecca lay beside Soaring Eagle in their warm teepee with James sleeping peacefully between them, she reflected on how much her life had changed. She had lost everything she thought she wanted, only to find something better than she had ever dared to dream. "Do you ever regret it?" Soaring Eagle asked quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "Leaving your old life behind?" Rebecca considered the question seriously. "I regret the pain it caused my mother," she said finally. "And I regret that James will never know his grandparents. But this life we've built together, this family, this tribe, this way of living in harmony with the world around us, no, I don't regret any of that." Soaring Eagle smiled and pulled her closer. "Good," he said, "because tomorrow we start teaching you to hunt. Winter Flower says if you truly want to be Comanche woman, you must learn all the skills, not just the gentle ones. Rebecca laughed, imagining herself trying to use a bow and arrow. I'll probably be terrible at it. Maybe, Soaring Eagle agreed cheerfully. But you thought you would be terrible at making moccasins too, and now you make best ones in tribe. You have gift for learning new things when you put your mind to it. 2 years had passed since Rebecca's wedding to Soaring Eagle, and life in the tribe had settled into a comfortable rhythm. James was now a sturdy 3-year-old who spoke both languages fluently and could ride a horse almost as well as he could walk. Rebecca had become proficient in all the skills a Comanche woman needed, and she had given birth to a daughter they named Little Moon, a beautiful child with her mother's green eyes and her father's black hair. But the peaceful life they had built was about to be shattered by the outside world. The trouble began when a traveling merchant named Henry Patterson arrived in Cedar Ridge with disturbing news. He had been trading with various tribes throughout Texas and claimed to have seen Rebecca living among the Comanche as the wife of a warrior. I'm telling you, Thomas, it was definitely your daughter, Patterson insisted, standing in the Miller family store while several townspeople listened. She was dressed like one of them savages, and she had 2 children, a boy about 3 and a baby girl, living as a heathen wife to some warrior. Thomas Miller, now graying and more bitter than ever, felt his carefully rebuilt reputation crumbling once again. For 2 years he had told everyone who asked that his daughter was dead, killed by the wilderness after her shameful exile. It had been easier than admitting he didn't know what had happened to her. You must be mistaken, Thomas said stiffly. Rebecca died in the wilderness shortly after she left Cedar Ridge. Everyone knows that. But Patterson shook his head firmly. No mistake about it. She's alive, all right, living among the Comanche like she was born to it, spoke their heathen tongue and everything. Word spread quickly through Cedar Ridge and the surrounding settlements. The story grew and changed with each telling until it bore little resemblance to the truth. Some versions claimed Rebecca had been kidnapped and forced into slavery. Others suggested she had gone willingly and was now helping the Comanche plan raids against white settlements. The rumors eventually reached Fort Davis, where they came to the attention of Captain William Hayes, an ambitious young officer who had recently been assigned to the frontier. Hayes was eager to make a name for himself and saw an opportunity in the story of a white woman living among hostile Indians. This is exactly the kind of situation that demands military intervention, Hayes declared to his lieutenant during a planning meeting. We cannot allow white women to be held captive by savages, regardless of the circumstances that led to their capture. Lieutenant Rodriguez, a more experienced officer who had served on the frontier for several years, tried to offer a different perspective. Sir, if the woman has been with the tribe for 2 years and has children, the situation might be more complicated than it appears. Perhaps we should investigate further before taking action. But Hayes was not interested in complications. He saw only an opportunity to launch a successful mission that would look good in his reports to headquarters. A white woman and her children are living among hostile Indians, Lieutenant. Our duty is clear. We will organize a rescue mission immediately. Meanwhile, within the Comanche tribe, there were growing concerns about the increasing presence of white settlers and soldiers in their territory. Hunting grounds that had been empty just a few years earlier now had homesteads and cattle ranches scattered across them. The buffalo herds were being pushed further west, making it harder to find the resources the tribe needed to survive. Some of the younger warriors were calling for more aggressive action against the encroaching settlers. They argued that the white people would never stop taking Comanche land unless they were forcibly driven away. They promised peace in treaties. Then break every promise, declared Fierce Wolf, a hot-headed young warrior who had lost friends in skirmishes with settlers. We should strike first before they grow too strong to fight. But Chief Tall Bear counseled patience and wisdom. War brings only more war, he reminded the tribal council. Our children need peace to grow strong. Our people need time to adapt to the changing world. Soaring Eagle found himself caught in the middle of these debates. As Rebecca's husband, he was particularly aware of how complicated the relationship between the two cultures could be. He had seen firsthand that not all white people were the same, but he also understood his fellow warriors' anger at the loss of their traditional way of life. My wife has brought much good to our tribe, he argued during one heated council meeting. She has healed our sick, taught our children new skills, and proven her loyalty time and again. But she is still white, and that makes some of our young men question my judgment. The tension came to a head when scouts reported unusual military activity near the tribal territory. Cavalry patrols were moving in patterns that suggested they were searching for something specific, rather than conducting routine border security. They're looking for us, Rebecca realized with growing dread when Soaring Eagle shared this news with her. Someone must have told them I'm here. Soaring Eagle nodded grimly. I think so too. Question is, what do they want? To rescue you or to punish tribe for keeping you? Rebecca felt sick with worry. She had found happiness in belonging with the Comanche, but her presence was now potentially putting the entire tribe in danger. Maybe I should go to them, she said quietly. Tell them I'm here willingly, that no one has harmed me. No, Soaring Eagle said firmly. You are my wife, member of this tribe. We do not give up our people to satisfy white soldiers who do not understand our ways. But privately, Soaring Eagle was deeply concerned. He had grown up hearing stories of what happened when the army decided to rescue white captives from Indian tribes. Usually the rescues turned into attacks, with many people killed on both sides. The situation grew more tense when Chief Tallbear received a message from another tribal leader warning that soldiers were asking questions about a white woman and her children in various Comanche camps. The military was clearly conducting a systematic search, and it was only a matter of time before they located the right tribe. We need to move deeper into the territory, suggested Standing Bear. Take the tribe west, away from the settlements and the soldiers. But that would mean abandoning their current hunting grounds just as spring was bringing new life to the plains. It would also mean running, which went against every instinct the Comanche had as a warrior culture. During this difficult time, Rebecca struggled with feelings of guilt and responsibility. She watched her husband trying to balance his loyalty to her with his duty to the tribe, and she saw how the stress was affecting everyone around her. Little James, now old enough to sense adult tensions even if he didn't understand them, asked his mother one day, "Why do the warriors look angry when they see us? Did we do something wrong?" Rebecca knelt down to meet her son's worried eyes. "No, sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated problems to solve, and it makes them worried and sad." "Are the bad soldiers coming to hurt us?" James asked with the directness of a 3-year-old. Rebecca felt her heart break a little. "I don't know, James, but your father and I will always protect you and your sister no matter what happens." The crisis deepened when one of the tribe's scouts returned with alarming news. The cavalry unit was definitely moving toward their area, and they were being guided by someone who knew the terrain well, possibly a white trader who was familiar with Comanche camping patterns. "They will find us within 2 days, the scout reported to Chief Tallbear. "Maybe, less if they travel through the night." That evening, the tribal council met to decide their course of action. Some wanted to pack up immediately and move the entire tribe to safety. Others argued for sending a delegation to meet with the soldiers and try to resolve the situation peacefully. A few of the younger warriors suggested something more drastic. "Why do we run from them?" Fierce Wolf demanded. "Let them come. We will show them what happens to those who threaten our families." "And then what?" Chief Tallbear asked calmly. "After we kill their soldiers, more will come. Then more after that. Is this the world you want to leave for your children?" Soaring Eagle stood up slowly, knowing that what he was about to say would be difficult for everyone to hear. "There is another choice," he said quietly. "Rebecca and I could leave the tribe temporarily. Take our children and go far away until this passes. That way the soldiers find no white woman and the tribe is safe." The suggestion sent a shock through the council. Rebecca, who had been listening quietly from the edge of the meeting area, stood up as well. "No," she said firmly, speaking in fluent Comanche so everyone could understand. "I will not run and hide like a criminal. This is my home. These are my people, and I will not let anyone force me to abandon them." Her words carried clearly in the still night air, and several tribal members nodded approvingly. But the fundamental problem remained unchanged. The approaching soldiers represented a threat that could destroy the peaceful life the tribe had built. As the council meeting broke up without a clear decision, Rebecca walked to the edge of the camp and stared out at the star-filled sky. Somewhere out there, soldiers were riding toward them with guns and orders and assumptions about what they would find. Soaring Eagle came up behind her and placed his hands gently on her shoulders. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "we face it together. You are not alone in this." The soldiers arrived at dawn, their horses' hooves thundering across the prairie as they surrounded the Comanche camp. Captain Hayes had brought 20 men, all armed and ready for trouble. They approached with military precision, forming a wide circle around the teepees while the tribe's people emerged to see what was happening. Rebecca heard the commotion and stepped out of her teepee holding baby Little Moon, with 3-year-old James clinging to her deerskin dress. Her heart pounded as she saw the blue uniforms and gleaming weapons, but she forced herself to remain calm. These men had come for her, and how she handled the next few minutes could determine whether people lived or died. Captain Hayes rode to the center of the camp, his eyes scanning the crowd until they fixed on Rebecca. Even dressed in Comanche clothing with her hair braided in the tribal style, her green eyes and pale skin marked her clearly as the white woman he had come to find. "I am Captain William Hayes of the United States Army," he announced in a loud voice. "I have come to rescue Rebecca Miller and her children from their captivity among these Indians." A murmur of anger ran through the Comanche warriors, but Chief Tallbear held up his hand for silence. He stepped forward with the dignity of a leader who had dealt with white officials before. "I am Chief Tallbear," he said in careful English. "There are no captives in our camp. All our people are here by choice." Captain Hayes dismounted and strode toward Rebecca, ignoring the chief entirely. "Miss Miller, I'm here to take you and your children to safety. You don't need to be afraid anymore. These savages can't hurt you now." Rebecca felt a surge of anger at his dismissive tone and his assumptions about her situation. She stepped forward, still holding Little Moon protectively. "I am not Miss Miller," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the silent camp. "I am Mrs. Soaring Eagle, wife of a Comanche warrior and member of this tribe. I am not a captive and I do not need to be rescued." The captain's face showed his shock. This was not the grateful, terrified victim he had expected to find. "Ma'am, you've obviously been through a terrible ordeal," he said, his tone becoming condescending. "These people have held you for so long that you've forgotten who you really are. But you're safe now. We're here to take you home." "This is my home," Rebecca replied firmly. "These are my people, and this man," she gestured toward Soaring Eagle, who had appeared at her side, "is my husband. I have no wish to leave." Soaring Eagle stood tall beside his wife, his hand resting on the handle of his knife but making no threatening moves. "My wife speak truth," he said in his accented English. "She come to us by choice. She stay by choice. No one force her to do anything." Captain Hayes looked around the camp, taking in the sight of Rebecca dressed as an Indian woman, the mixed-race children, and the warriors watching him with barely concealed hostility. Nothing about this situation matched the simple rescue mission he had envisioned. "Ma'am," he said, trying a different approach, "even if you believe you want to stay here, think about your children. These are American children who deserve to grow up in civilization, not as heathens among savages." The insult to the tribe sent a ripple of tension through the watching Comanche. Several young warriors shifted restlessly, their hands moving toward their weapons. Rebecca could feel the situation sliding toward violence. "My children are growing up to be strong, healthy, and happy," she said, her voice rising with passion. "They speak 2 languages, they know how to live in harmony with the natural world, and they're surrounded by people who love and protect them. What more could any mother want? They're growing up without Christianity, without education, without proper moral guidance," Hayes insisted. "And this boy," he pointed at James, "he's old enough to be corrupted by the violent ways of these people. He needs to be in a proper school learning civilized behavior." James pressed closer to his mother, frightened by the angry voices and the strange man pointing at him. Rebecca wrapped her free arm around her son protectively. "My son is learning courage, honor, and respect for all living things," she said. "He's learning to be strong without being cruel, to be brave without being reckless. If that's not proper moral guidance, then I don't know what is." At that moment, a commotion near the edge of the camp drew everyone's attention. Thomas Miller rode up with 2 other men from Cedar Ridge, having traveled hard to catch up with the military expedition. Rebecca's father looked older and more worn than she remembered, his face lined with years of bitterness and regret. When Thomas saw his daughter, dressed in Indian clothes and standing beside a Comanche warrior, his face went white with shock. "Rebecca," he whispered, dismounting from his horse on unsteady legs. "Hello, Father." Rebecca said quietly, her voice carefully neutral. Thomas looked at his grandson for the first time. A healthy, bright-eyed boy who stared back at him with curious intelligence. Then his gaze fell on the baby girl in Rebecca's arms, clearly the child of a mixed marriage. "What have you done to yourself?" Thomas asked, his voice full of pain and confusion. "What have they done to you?" "They saved my life," Rebecca replied simply. "When you cast me out to die in the wilderness, these people took me in. They gave me food, shelter, protection, and love. They gave me a family and a place to belong." Thomas flinched as if she had struck him. "We had to maintain standards," he said defensively. The community expected you to abandon your own daughter and grandchild," Rebecca interrupted. "These savages you're so afraid of showed more Christian charity than any of the Christians in Cedar Ridge." Chief Tallbear, who had been listening to this exchange, stepped forward again. "Captain Hayes," he said formally, "you have seen that the woman is here by choice. Her husband is good man, respected warrior. Her children are healthy and loved. What more do you need to understand?" But Captain Hayes was facing a dilemma. He had come here expecting to rescue a helpless victim and return as a hero. Instead, he had found a situation that challenged everything he believed about the superiority of white civilization over Indian savagery. "The law is clear," he said, grasping for authority. "White women and children cannot be allowed to live among hostile Indians. It's a matter of national security." "Hostile?" Soaring Eagle stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "We have kept peace with your settlements. We have harmed no one. We only want to live our lives and raise our families. How does this make us hostile?" For the first time, Captain Hayes seemed uncertain. The Comanche warriors around him were clearly capable of violence, but they had shown remarkable restraint despite being surrounded and insulted. The woman he had come to rescue was articulate, healthy, and obviously devoted to her Indian husband and their children. Lieutenant Rodriguez, who had been quietly observing the confrontation, leaned close to his captain. "Sir," he said quietly, "if we try to take this woman by force, people are going to die, and she's clearly not being held against her will." One of the young Comanche warriors, Fierce Wolf, had heard enough. He pushed forward, his anger finally boiling over. "You come to our land," he said in broken English. "You point guns at our families. You call us savages and heathens. Why should we listen to your words when you show no respect for our ways?" The tension in the camp ratcheted higher as warriors on both sides prepared for potential violence. Rebecca could see that one wrong word, one sudden movement, could turn this confrontation into a bloodbath. She made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. Stepping into the space between the two groups, she began to speak in both English and Comanche, her voice carrying clearly across the silent camp. "I came to this tribe as a broken, desperate woman with nowhere else to turn," she said. "I was pregnant, abandoned and cast out by my own people for making a mistake that hurt no one but myself. These warriors could have left me to die, and by the laws of their enemies they probably should have. Instead, they showed me kindness." She turned to address Captain Hayes directly. "You speak of civilization and proper moral guidance. Let me tell you what I've learned about both. I've learned that true civilization isn't about the clothes you wear or the buildings you live in. It's about how you treat people who are different from you, how you care for those who are weaker, and whether you choose compassion over judgment." The camp was completely silent now, everyone hanging on her words. "I've seen more genuine morality in this Comanche camp than I ever saw in Cedar Ridge," Rebecca continued. "These people judge others by their actions and their character, not by their mistakes or their bloodline. They've taught my son that courage means protecting others, not conquering them. They've shown my daughter that she can be strong and gentle at the same time." She looked directly at her father, her voice softening slightly. "Father, I know you thought you were doing the right thing when you sent me away. You were trying to protect the family's reputation and maintain your standing in the community. But look at what that choice cost us. 3 years of knowing your grandchildren, 3 years of being a family." Thomas Miller stood frozen, staring at his daughter with tears in his eyes. She had become a woman of strength and conviction, nothing like the frightened girl he had cast out of Cedar Ridge. Rebecca turned back to Captain Hayes. "You came here to rescue me from savagery." Rebecca's words hung in the air like smoke from a sacred fire, touching everyone present in different ways. The silence stretched on as both soldiers and Comanche warriors absorbed what they had just heard. This was not the simple rescue mission or hostile confrontation that anyone had expected. Captain Hayes found himself facing something he had never encountered in his military training, a situation where the clear lines between right and wrong, civilization and savagery, had become hopelessly blurred. The woman he had come to rescue was obviously intelligent, healthy, and genuinely happy. Her children were well cared for and loved. The savage warriors he had expected to fight had shown remarkable restraint and dignity. Lieutenant Rodriguez stepped closer to his captain and spoke quietly. "Sir, with respect, if we try to force this situation, we're going to be the ones who look like the savages. This woman has made her choice clearly and freely." Captain Hayes looked around the camp, taking in details he had missed in his initial rush to judgment. The teepees were well maintained and organized. Children played safely while their parents worked. There was no sign of the violence and chaos he had been taught to expect from Indian camps. Thomas Miller was the first to break the heavy silence. The old merchant walked slowly toward his daughter, his steps hesitant and his face showing the weight of 3 years of regret. "Rebecca," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I was wrong. I was so concerned about what other people would think, about protecting our family's reputation, that I forgot what family really means." He stopped a few feet away from her, looking at his grandson James with wonder and sorrow. "I threw away 3 years with my own grandchildren because I was too proud to stand up to the judgment of neighbors who probably forgot about our troubles. Within a few months anyway." Rebecca felt tears starting in her eyes, but she held her ground. "Those years can't be gotten back, Father. James doesn't even know who you are." "I know," Thomas said, his voice breaking, "and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But maybe it's not too late to start over. Maybe I can learn to be the grandfather I should have been from the beginning." He turned to face Soaring Eagle, and for a moment, the two men studied each other. The aging white merchant and the proud Comanche warrior who had taken his place as Rebecca's protector. "You," Thomas said to Soaring Eagle, struggling with the words. "You cared for my daughter when I failed her. You've been a father to my grandson when I wasn't there. I owe you a debt I can never repay." Soaring Eagle regarded the older man with careful eyes. "Your daughter needed family," he said simply. "Now she has tribe, husband, children. But maybe good for children to know white grandfather too, if grandfather come with respect." This unexpected exchange sent ripples through both groups. The soldiers watched their captain struggle with a situation that had no clear military solution. The Comanche warriors saw their leader considering the possibility of peace with men who had arrived pointing weapons at their families. Chief Tall Bear stepped forward, his weathered face thoughtful. "Captain Hayes," he said, his voice carrying the authority of years of leadership, "you came here believing you were saving a woman and children from a terrible fate. Instead, you have found a family living in peace and happiness. What do your laws say about destroying families that harm no one?" Captain Hayes removed his hat and ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that made him look younger and less certain. "The truth is, Chief, my orders were based on reports that may not have been complete. I was told there was a captive situation that required military intervention. And now you see the truth with your own eyes," Chief Tall Bear replied. "Will you let truth change your actions, or will you follow orders that were based on lies?" The young captain found himself at a crossroads that would define not just his career but his character. He could force the issue, take Rebecca and her children by military authority, and probably start a war that would cost many lives. Or he could admit that the situation was more complex than his superiors had understood. Rebecca watched the captain's internal struggle and decided to offer him a way to save face while doing the right thing. "Captain Hayes," she said respectfully, "you came here to ensure the safety and welfare of American citizens. You can report truthfully that you found Rebecca Miller alive, healthy, and well cared for. You found her children growing up strong and smart in a loving family. You found a peaceful tribe that poses no threat to settlements and asks only to be left alone to live their lives." She paused, then added, "You can report that the situation requires no military action, but perhaps could benefit from diplomatic discussion between the tribe and local authorities to ensure continued peace." This suggestion gave Captain Hayes exactly what he needed, a way to complete his mission without violence while opening the door For future negotiations rather than confrontation, Lieutenant Rodriguez nodded approvingly. That's a wise suggestion, ma'am. A diplomatic approach would serve everyone's interests better than military action. Captain Hayes looked around the camp one more time, then made his decision. Chief Tallbear, I came here prepared for conflict, but I'm leaving convinced that peace is the better path, Mrs. He paused, then corrected himself, Mrs. Soaring Eagle. I can see that you and your children are safe and happy. I'll report to my superiors that the situation has been resolved without need for further military intervention. A collective sigh of relief went through both groups. The immediate crisis had passed, but larger questions remained about how the two cultures could coexist in the changing landscape of Texas. Over the next several hours, something remarkable happened. Instead of the soldiers departing immediately, both groups began to interact cautiously. Some of the younger soldiers, curious about Comanche life, asked respectful questions about their customs and skills. A few Comanche warriors, intrigued by military equipment and tactics, engaged in careful conversations with the more experienced soldiers. Thomas Miller spent time with his grandson James, awkwardly at first but with growing warmth as the boy's natural friendliness overcame initial shyness. Little Moon, still a baby, charmed everyone with her bright eyes and ready smiles. She has your mother's eyes, Thomas told Rebecca, as he held his granddaughter for the first time. Catherine would have loved to meet her grandchildren. How is Mother? Rebecca asked, her first personal question since the confrontation began. She misses you every day, Thomas admitted. She never agreed with my decision to send you away, and she's never stopped hoping you were alive somewhere. If I go back and tell her I've found you happy and safe with a family of your own, it'll be the first time I've seen her truly smile in 3 years. As evening approached, Chief Tallbear made an unprecedented offer. Captain Hayes, your men have traveled far and hard. You are welcome to camp nearby tonight and share food with us before you begin your journey home. The invitation was a significant gesture of trust and hospitality. Captain Hayes, understanding its importance, accepted gratefully. That night, around the cooking fires, something historic happened. Soldiers and Comanche sat together, sharing food and stories, learning about each other as people rather than enemies. Rebecca found herself serving as translator not just for languages, but for customs and ideas that each group found foreign. Young James, with the easy adaptability of childhood, became a bridge between the groups. He showed the soldiers his Comanche bow and arrows, then listened with fascination as they explained how their rifles worked. He spoke to everyone in whatever language seemed most natural, unconsciously demonstrating that communication across cultures was possible. As the evening wound down, Captain Hayes approached Rebecca and Soaring Eagle privately. I want you both to know that I'll be recommending to my superiors that this tribe be left in peace. What I've seen here today, it's changed how I think about a lot of things. People are people, Soaring Eagle replied simply. Good hearts and bad hearts exist in all colors of skin. You're right about that, the captain agreed. I hope my report can help prevent future misunderstandings. The next morning, as the soldiers prepared to leave, Thomas Miller faced a difficult decision. He could return to Cedar Ridge with them, or he could stay longer to build a relationship with the grandchildren he had lost 3 years of knowing. I'd like to stay a few more days, if that's acceptable to everyone, he said hesitantly. I have a lot of lost time to make up for. Chief Tallbear nodded approvingly. Grandfathers are important for children. You are welcome to learn our ways, as we learn yours. 5 years later, the story of Rebecca and Soaring Eagle had become legend in both cultures, but for different reasons. Among the white settlements, it was told as a story of redemption and second chances. How a woman who had lost everything found a new life and happiness in unexpected places. Among the Comanche, it became a tale of courage and wisdom. How opening their hearts to someone different had brought new knowledge and understanding to the tribe. James and Little Moon grew up as living symbols of what was possible when people chose understanding over fear, acceptance over judgment. James became fluent in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Comanche, and served as a translator and negotiator when disputes